Welcome to the Tow Club Industry Podcast. As always, we've promised to have guests on that can provide meaningful information to those of you that are listening and watching. And today I have somebody who's very interesting. I have Andrew Meinster, Tow Truck Insurance. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong, Andrew. How you doing?
You nailed it. Nailed it.
Okay, cool. Um, so we're going to talk insurance today. Again, glad to have you on, Andrew. And obviously I do this with everyone. But tell us a little bit, apart from the obvious, about who you are, your history, and your experience in the industry that's gotten you to this point.
Right. So thank you for having me on here. It's an honor to be on this podcast and obviously nice to meet you, Art.
Yeah.
So yeah, my name's Andrew Meinster. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I originally started in insurance at a local State Farm company agency, right? Selling like personal auto, homeowners, life. I realized, I was getting calls from business owners asking me if I can place their insurance. Well, as you know, State Farm is very limited on what they can offer in the commercial space. So I took it upon myself to seek out, and I was placed with a company around here, local independent agency, for 10 years, where in this industry, it's basically like it's sink or swim. Okay. Like if you don't find a niche, you're just like a generalist and, they tell you to find a niche and go after it. So I started in the automotive service space and where I was targeting auto repair shops, body shops, gas stations, a little bit of towing. And, I realized when there's a tow truck on a commercial insurance policy, there's a lot more rate, a lot more, it just makes the business more interesting. I gravitated towards that, probably because there's more premium, right? More, you know, commission that I could earn. But really felt comfortable in that space and talking to that demographic, that industry really just resonated with me, that they're, getting their hands dirty, they're up early, there may not be air conditioning in their shop. Like, I felt comfortable. I didn't have to wear like a suit and tie, right? And go meet with these folks. So I did very well in building and connecting to that niche in the tri-state here, like Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware. Realized that, hey, like with the social media and the landscape that we have and these free tools, right, I can really branch out and start going after other shops that do towing, more on a national level. So that's what I did. And then I then just branched out and fully just did towing operations, on a national level. So that's a little bit of a long story short on how I got into the industry and you know up until this year, I was going through some challenges with the company I was with, and it just didn't work out. So, all these we built a pretty large portfolio of about 900 plus towing automotive service accounts across the country, and we were acquired by another firm. So my book of business sold to another firm called NSM Insurance Brokers. Their parent company is NSM Insurance Group. They're actually local here out of Conshohocken, but they have about 1,500 employees all over the country in the UK. And it'll be a game changer for what I'm doing and what I'm looking to accomplish in the towing space. I know I've been talking a while, so any questions in between that?
Oh no, that's really interesting. I mean, it sounds to me you started obviously selling captive policies, right? Under State
Right.
Farm, you can't offer. There's not a lot of products under that captive arrangement for you to perhaps offer to the towing industry or to the auto body guy,
Right.
the different types of automotive applications. It's interesting because as a tower myself, I've been approached in the past, State Farm, hey, we want to sell you insurance. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have anything for me, trust me. And then I go through the song and dance with them, and then sure enough, they're like, oh yeah, I can't help you. It's like, well, you reached out to me. Why
I
don't
know,
you
I
know
know.
that? But yeah,
I,
no,
I
that
would say also to I like hard to place insurance niches, right? So like towing's definitely a really tough niche, volatile.
yes.
So that like sort of helping steer that industry in the right direction, that is attractive to me. Like I don't, everybody, a lot of insurance carriers like love the vanilla stuff, like, your landscaping contractor, your florist, your funeral home, right? But no, I like the tough stuff.
Well, particularly if if you know the segment, right, and that's
Yep.
where I know everybody who's listening here, and to those of you that don't know this, I mean, it's time to know. Uh, Towing insurance is very difficult depending on your jurisdiction. Just to get a policy,
Mhm.
is difficult enough. The carriers have gotten very, very selective with who they choose to insure. They want to know, the driver's driving records, the type of truck, and obviously the risk factors with all that different type of equipment. Heavy duty trucks are going to carry more risk per se. So there's a lot of things that go into it. Um, I've seen your social media outreach, which targets our industry. I've seen your ads. I think you're doing great with that, by the way.
Thank
Um,
you.
I wanted to ask you, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I wanted
Sure.
to ask you just something that I like to ask people that are in your space is what if you could pick one eye-opening or interesting claim that you've ever come across? I know you probably don't administer the claims, but I
Yeah.
know you know of them. But can you share an interesting one with us?
And it's interesting that that's one of your questions, because I was talking to our claims manager, the other day, somebody in claims, and I've just become so numb to some of the claims that I've seen, and, with fatalities, just injuries and so forth. But I would say the one that sticks out to me the most is we had a towing company and repair shop. Um, they had a worker that was getting picked up in one of the tow trucks to go pick up another vehicle. And so the workers walking out of the shop, going to the street, a stolen vehicle
Oh,
is coming down the road. They're about to get into the our truck, right? And as they're getting into the truck, they get struck and killed
oh,
while getting into the truck
oh my God.
by a person who stole a vehicle, who's just driving erratic,
Yeah.
and just super, super sad, right? Like talking about just the wrong place at the wrong time. Um, that one sticks out to me the most. Also, from an insurance, right? Like, a stolen vehicle, that person wasn't permitted to drive, that vehicle probably didn't have insurance or whatever it was. So now our policies um uninsured motorists limit is paying out on the injuries slash death for that worker, plus workers comp as well. So that one sticks out to me. We've had also a few um fatalities, but also fatalities from a tow truck doing everything correctly, right? And somebody just hops out in the middle of the street, or is in the street, like, and is pitch black, and they get killed. One another A claim with that scenario happened last year. Thankfully, this tow operator had one of the best dash cams, telematics systems that were set up in their vehicle. they were able to this guy, it was like broad daylight, so I don't know what that person was doing in the middle of the roadway, but we were able to clock how fast his vehicle was going, see inside the video, inside the truck. Was he distracted, right? Like, not at all. So, having those tools for a towing company and, invested in all of their equipment is super, super important to battle those claims. Because with that information, it's like that's your defense right there.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
no, I
yeah.
I I I preach this to towers all the time, is to cover themselves, and I wanna touch on that, a little bit more. Um, I did wanna circle back because one of the reasons why, our team and I wanted to contact you and have a discussion with you was, you know, you may or may not know this about the towing industry, but I've always complained that we're last to adopt emerging technologies. And I've always cautioned our industry, like, stop being last, start being first, start being pioneers as opposed to just, oh, I see the trucking guys are doing this, I'm going to do this. But because of what I perceive to be a very successful social media campaign that you do, um, and clearly you're on the younger side, um, and I only say that because I have there's a bit of a perceived bias on my part in terms of sort of demographics and how it plays out in social media and who I assume to be the users of social media. I always presume they're the on the younger side. And so when I see somebody like you, like, killing it on the social media outreach side, you know, hitting our industry right in the face with the ads and the content that's relevant to what they're doing, I always want to ask, um, you know, who are the key influencer players in the social media market that you follow or know, that are not only helping you, but that you're sort of modeling some of your outreach after. You could go ahead and drop names, or who are some
Yeah,
people that you
yeah,
feel like are
that-
in.
that's a good question. I always try to network with industry professionals. Um, I think that the industry, there's some old timers who have a certain perspective on, how messages need to come across. But I think that the younger generation is more, you know, listens more to something, with value added, maybe with some humor to it, or you
Yeah,
know so yeah, so in terms of people that I follow, I do follow, I'm actually pretty close with tow truck wags, Brian Wagaman. He actually just started his company this year, and we insure him. He's got like 400, 500,000 followers, and the messages that he comes across, and his content is definitely resonating, humorous, and just very interesting. So I think he brings a lot of attention to the industry. Um, in terms of, I really just I follow and try to get a better understanding, really, with any towing, any tower out there. Like, I want to know exactly, like, why is it slow this year? Like, what are the reasons? Nobody can really, like, tell me. Like, I'm hearing everywhere that it's slow. So I'm like trying to really entrench myself and go that extra layer, right? So I can better understand, even from like the terminology that you guys talk about, or from
yeah,
like, I'm just trying to embed myself so deep in the industry, because I genuinely care about the industry and I want to know more.
yeah.
Um, so I would say tow truck wags I follow a lot. I think there's a few other
He
people.
also advertises for you, is that correct?
Yes, he does. He does. He
Yeah,
does.
I've noticed that, and our production team, I think, has been in contact with him. I think
Yeah.
hopefully we'll
I
have
mean,
him
I can
soon.
help with that. I can
Yeah,
definitely
hopefully
facilitate
we'll
that.
have him on soon. I'd like to hear what he has to say. one thing that's interesting about him is that um you don't oftentimes see people in our space
Hmm.
uh with that sort of following. So that's interesting. Um it's interesting to see how he was able to accumulate such a following. Um and
For sure.
I was under the impression that he was a tower the entire time. I obviously I don't know him personally,
Mhm.
but I saw recently apparently that he did start his own company.
Yep.
So for him, congrats to him. Um, and it is definitely interesting because our profession did not have an online presence not too long ago.
Hmm.
Uh, the proliferation of social media and you know the dissemination of content. The interesting part to me is because we're in the industry, when I see content like towing related content, I'm like, yeah, I see that every day. Who gives a hoot about that,
Yeah.
right? But the frame of mind that I think our industry has to be in is, look, it may not be interesting to us, but
Hmm.
it's interesting to the general public. They
I,
don't know these things. They don't see the things that we see every day.
yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
for example, I was watching one of your videos the other day where I think you were the person you were talking to on the phone you might have known, and you had to tow their son or daughter's vehicle,
yeah, yeah. It's
right? Right.
actual
So
friend,
like,
like,
but I think that's the type of stuff that I'm doing on the insurance end. But I think showcasing that, right? People are like, okay, yeah, like they're not just out there towing random vehicles, they're towing them for a reason. And there's just some more connection to the general public to better understand your business, why you're doing what you're doing, and just making light of it. So I commend you for doing that.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be honest. I mean, like I said, I have a small towing company, and it is sometimes challenging to know what people want to hear. Um, I'm sure you would understand, and I'm sure most people understand that I'm somewhat limited on what I can share because, when you have a client, you have an obligation to, look after their identity. You don't want them to.
Yeah.
So I feel like sometimes I feel inside, I'm like, man, it would be so cool if I could share this with the general public. But it's like, this is
Yeah.
not fair to my customer, man. Like they don't want this, what they
Yeah.
think as, hey, I don't want my business out in the street. So you do have to be mindful of that. And there has to, I suppose, we're looking to strike a balance between what's interesting and protecting our clients and or vehicle owners. Um,
Right.
you know, we had an incident a couple months ago where somebody drove over the parking stop and into the landscaping, and the photo was shared to me by a driver, and he's like, this would be great for social media. I'm like, yeah, but would the owner of the car enjoy seeing what they might view as, hey, they're mocking me because I made a mistake? So that there has to be some uh
Yeah.
consideration for that. um I I want to touch on that a little bit more, but I have something that I really, really want to know from you.
Uh-huh.
And I usually reserve these questions for the professionals of the industry, and you provide a professional service to our industry. So I think you are well positioned to tell me what you feel about this. Is I want to know, there's been an accelerated growth of technology and influence in the transportation sector to begin with. But what do you think? How much influence do you think it has in towing? How much influence do you think it has in your space? Um, and
Hmm.
what are you concerned about some of these changes? Do you think it's happening too fast, too slow? I'd like to hear what
Right.
specific thoughts are on how this is. Well, for example, we talked about we talk with transportation people all the time, but everybody's got one of these devices in their hand.
Hmm.
You're writing policies to mitigate risk. So
Yep.
how does technology sort of play into this? The reality is that people are more distracted on the road. I'll use that as an example, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I think the technology that's keeps coming out and and evolving, it's I'll tell you, I'll start on our side, right? Like I think that the tools and services that we're able to offer help with mitigating risk. For example, so we also do school bus contractors, right? And in our school bus program, we have a whole, a claims team that they do or no, I'm sorry, quarterly claims reviews where they're able to look at a school bus contractor, right? I don't know if you have them in California, but these are school bus companies that partner with school districts. They're not part of the
They
school
get
district.
hired. They're
Right.
not part of the
Exactly.
school district. They're an
Right.
independent bus
Right.
company.
So we're the data that we're getting is, as detailed as, hey, where these claims are happening, like we're able to look at their routes, right? And see where the most frequent claims are happening. Like we're able to find out the time of day, like, and this is all like data and analytics, right? And we're able to put that information together and make recommendations to these school bus contractors, right? Based on all of that data, that claims data. So for us, that the advance in technology on that end is going to be a game changer, especially for when we can implement that in other niches like towing, right? What do you think that that would be helpful to get, like, hey, like your claims are happening at this time of day, maybe it's this type of drive, like this driver, or your claims are with drivers under the age of X, right? If you can get that like data and look at it on a quarterly, semi-annual, annual basis, I think that would be super helpful because now you know, maybe to steer clear from XY street at this time of day, or don't hire a driver under a certain age,
Sure.
you know. So I think it's very beneficial. Now, on the flip side, with everybody, having a phone and texting and driving and and these self-driving vehicles, that's just another layer to it, that's makes it very challenging,
Right.
because all it takes is a quick second, right? Somebody look down at their phone and you know
Right.
but I think by having the dash cams, the telematics, everything in the trucks that can really shield you or prevent you from a frivolous loss will,
Right.
you know, and those are only going to evolve, right? Those devices are only going to get better over time. Pictures are going to be more clearer.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on the right on the right sort of area of and the crux of what I'm getting at is as a software provider, Tow Club. I mean, me and you are sitting here talking about the industry, but one of the missions we have here at Tow Club is this is coming, this is here. How is our development team going to route these safety apparatuses, whether it's and I can't remember the name of the outfit, but they produce hardware that gets wired into the truck that provides an audible alert in the truck when you're too close,
Hmm.
like a reminder to hit the brakes and whatnot. A lot of the new OEMs have this technology baked into the truck, the chassis. However, there are companies, several, I believe, out there that provide this hardware to be retrofitted for those that have older equipment, which is
Right.
very old. I mean, this has only been this type of technology. I think they call it accident avoidance alert system or something to that degree. So streamline these softwares and integrate them with the management tools that we're selling to towing companies, which is software as a subscription. For
Hmm.
example, we have a relationship with Azuga. Azuga provides the telematics and the cameras. So we have an integration with them so that our software subscribers can log in. They can see where their equipment is at. They can potentially be notified if there are certain alerts through these integrations. So I think that, and I hope, I should say, that the industry looks at this stuff and
Yeah.
doesn't view it as a, oh, that's just something else I have to pay for. This has been the challenge for me, Andrew, is as a tower, I don't want to be that. I want that to be the rule. I don't want to be the exception. I want it to
Yeah.
be the rule that towers around the country look at these, whether it's
Yeah.
hardware, software integrations. I was talking to a gentleman the other day about there is there's a company, Haas Alert, that
Yep.
you know
Very
they
familiar with that.
right
Great.
that it's providing hardware and software solutions that could potentially mitigate a death, a
Yeah.
fatality.
So
So
I'm
you
very
know
familiar with Tom
yeah,
and
so if we're looking at if the industry is looking at these things as a burden, as opposed to looking at them as something they should be saying, hey, yes, we want
yeah,
it. We want it.
yeah,
We want it integrated
totally agree.
with our management software. Um, I'm hoping that we can get there. And the thing is it's going to take a village though. It's going to take not only the software providers like us, there's going to need to be a collaborative effort. So I think that's the right approach. And I'm glad that you as an insurance provider also are embracing these ideas because that's what I think it's going to take, not only to reduce claims, but also how are you going to have a sustainable driver force if you're not having the tools to reduce the chances of an accident? Like, hey, I got a guy with 2 accidents in the last 5 years. He can't work for me now. He just had an
Mhm.
accident, for example. I'm using this as a this is the type of story that I hear, right? Is oh, I don't like this insurance company. They wouldn't accept my drivers. Well, what's going on with your driver? Well, they got well,
Right.
why are you upset with them? You're a risk. You
Right.
know, of
Yeah.
course they don't want your drivers. The guy's got an accident or two, he's got a speeding ticket or two. Why
Mhm.
why would they want, why would they want this guy working under their,
Right.
after through this? So
Yeah.
it's
Now,
going to
just to interrupt you, 1 second, my thought came, right, like, and this is a question I have for you.
yep.
Do you think the barrier to entry, right, into the towing industry there needs to be more steps to be able to operate a tow truck, own a company in the towing industry?
So I've been on both sides of this equation as
Mhm.
somebody who got started in a very difficult environment, uh, to the point I am in business now where I have 30-ish employees. So
Mhm.
I'm beyond the barrier to entry part. However, that barrier to entry was very, very challenging. Um,
Did you have experience
I
in the
did
industry?
I did. I was
Okay.
I got my start in towing through the auto body industry. I was an auto body. I had started a shop. I was having difficulties with my towing vendor. We decided to get into the towing space as a result of those struggles I had with my towing vendor at the time.
Mhm.
Um, if I'll explain this. This is a two-headed answer, right? On one hand, if you make the barriers of entry too difficult, you're going to drive up the cost of getting those services for the motoring public. On the other hand, if you make them too easy, uh, the insurance side of it will be astronomical because towers need to know, and most of them do know that you're buying. It's the pool approach, right? Like if that sector is expensive to insure, everybody's going to pay because the way that the insurance industry looks at our industry is it's they do the same thing. That's the way your industry
They
looks at
pool
what
the risk. Yep.
it's a pool approach. So I I I think there's no short answer, but I think the answer is it depends, and it depends
Mhm.
on the type of work you do. It depends on what your exposure is. If, for example, my towing service, the only type of towing we do is what we call PPI, private property impound. We contract with the property management industry. This is my property. These are the circumstances in which I want you to tow vehicles. I expect you to enforce our parking rules.
Right.
So it has its own sort of exposure.
You're a niche within a
Sure.
niche.
Yeah, the exposure it has is like person to person conflict likelihood. It's not a consensual arrangement, right? We're towing the vehicle when they don't want us to tow it. Now, so there's uh a specific use case and a specific type of exposure there. Now, the exposure that we don't have, thankfully, so but we don't do broken down car towing. The only type of towing we do is from a client's site to our storage facility. Not going on the side of the road, exposing our drivers to oncoming traffic
Mhm.
and to the risks that come with roadside assistance. That being said, we barrier to entry is a little different depending on the type of service or the specific service. And there are towing companies out there that say, I do everything. I do heavy duty, I do light duty, I do roadside assistance, I do private property impound, I do repo. Um, one one thing that we've determined over the years, and I'm very grateful for this, Andrew. I'm grateful that I've done all types of towing. Got here because I was like, oh, I did this. This I don't like this. This can get guys hurt, so I'm not gonna do this. I don't want the workers' comp exposure, or this type of work doesn't pay enough. And the exposure that I'm being subjected to, the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
So we all make determinations. Oh, this type of towing requires a special training. Why would I do that? Let me just stick to my kind of towing. I train my staff to do one thing. And so ultimately, that's the decision that we made.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. We only have one type of tow truck. It's a small auto load, gas
Yeah.
powered tow truck. We've got 10 of them. It's the only kind of equipment we have. And they're all set up the same. So my maintenance is easier. All the trucks are set up the same. They're the same brand. They're the same, the service is the same. So does my fleet limit me from other types of towing? Absolutely. But I don't want that other type of towing, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, so
You're good.
I talked to a lot of people in the insurance space about this, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. And before I ask, I'll share with you. I'm a California tower.
Mhm.
Um, we did our policy about 2.5 months ago. We renewed our policy, and over the past 5 or 6 years, every year on my annual renewal, um, I'm no longer shocked about this, but I've been kind of getting alarmed. Is I'm told, hey, there's only 3 or 4 insurance companies that write in California. So it leads me to ask you, what is the state of the towing insurance market? Why is it like this, let's say in California? And do you see this across the country? I'd love to know this.
Yeah. So California is definitely a hot state, probably one of the one of the worst out there. As you remember, Progressive about 5 years ago or 4 years ago pulled out of the market, right? I think they probably wrote maybe let's call it 80 million in tow truck insurance premium. When they did that, the other markets saw an influx of submissions, got nervous, got scared. You had a few companies pull out of California. California is just a very tough state, for several reasons, litigious reasons as well. But to your question, so we're post COVID now, right? During COVID, you had claims that were sort of pushed back, or that didn't go to trial, or that were because nobody was going in the courtroom. So fast forward 2 years after COVID, now some of these claims are being settled, but they're being settled for a higher amount that we're seeing from original, or like when they were originally reported. The reserves are much higher than what they're being paid. Um, so you have that, right? And then you have inflation, social inflation, you have the cost of parts, the cost of trucks, right? Everything compiled into one is just making it not profitable for insurance carriers right now. Um, California is definitely one of the worst states that we're seeing. Yes, there's probably three three more standard competitive carriers, and then there's like a few substandard for like distressed business, you know, companies with high claims, etc. So it really depends where you're at in the country, but like I'm in Pennsylvania right now, right? There's probably like 8 different carriers that will write towing depending on where you are in Pennsylvania. So if you're like near Philly, I'm like 45 minutes outside of Philly, right? There might be like 3 or 4. But if you go up to,
They can do that. They can say, "Hey, man, you're in the metro. You're in Philly. We're good. We're
yeah,
good."
yeah. Or you can go to like I call it like Pennsyltucky. Like it's
Okay,
like, it's like Kentucky in the middle of Pennsylvania,
right.
um, Western PA, and it's very rural, and you got
I've been
carrot.
out there.
Yeah,
I've been to Western Pennsylvania. It is very rural. What is that mountain region that you drive through when you're leaving Buffalo to get there? I can't pronounce it.
yeah,
Adirondack? Is that?
Adirondacks.
Yeah, is that how you?
Yeah,
Isn't that sort of on the
it
way
could
out
be.
there?
Yeah, it could be. We were just in Lancaster County and, staying at like a farm for vacation, and, it's just you're just in the middle of nowhere. But like here, I'm like 45 minutes to the city, and it's much more congested.
Got it.
So, like I said, different parts of the country have different carriers. There's some carriers that are writing some towing, and you're like, wow, like I never would have thought that company would insure a towing company. So there's a little bit. It depends where you're at in the country. But overall, like rates are up. We're seeing rates jump up. Right now, we have a few carriers that are doing 25% on renewals.
Wow.
You know,
Okay. And do you get? I mean, obviously, towers are not happy, clearly,
yeah,
but
not ha-
how much are you getting the attribution for these rate increase? Like, are towers blaming you, sort of, or I'm just out of
it-
curiosity.
some towers that aren't. I wish they were a little bit more educated on how insurance works, and like we're a broker, right? Like we can only really sell what's available to us to some degree. Like obviously like working on programs, trying to, you know, um, create different programs for the future, but we can only control what
Of course.
products, and carriers that, we have. But yes, I'm a punching bag a lot this
I was
year.
gonna say, like I remember when the state of the insurance industry really turned bad. This was probably 2019,
Yeah.
20.
Yep.
I remember we were, oh boy, this was really irritating too, because it was right before renewal and it was like 60% over the prior year. And I was like, we didn't, how can we account for this? Like, and keep in mind, we're not talking $10,000. I mean, I think the policy premium at the time was a little under 100. So
Mhm.
here comes a renewal quote for like 157, and I'm like, what the hell are we gonna do? Like, I can't,
Right.
so
Right.
I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but
No, yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah, for sure. But like
it
on
was
the
tough.
on the, on the flip side of that, it's like if everybody's getting hit with that, like your rates have to go up. Like everybody's rates have to go up.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I
Like
mean, like if other people's rates go up, then the likelihood is ours are going to go up too. It's just a question of, is it commensurate to our risk?
Mhm.
Right? Is so if the towing operator down the street, interestingly enough, we used to have one down the street from us that had to go out of business because they had a really tragic accident that involved a fatality. They were in business for like 65 years and they couldn't get a renewal, or the premium was going to be 8 times what it was, or something to that effect. But um my record as driving and claims is still going to put me in an advantageous position, which leads me to my next sort of thing is like, you know, I hope towers who are listening here understand that like safety management, drivers, claims management,
Yep.
that even if the market goes up, your premium is still going to be based in a commensurate way. In other words, you still may have an increase, but can you explain to towers sort of how that works and why it's so important, like that they keep their nose clean and pay the
Yes.
small claims? Don't, the guy says you
Yeah.
scratched his bumper. Well, hey, if you looked into it and you did in fact scratch his bumper, why the hell are you turning that in?
Yeah.
You know,
So, you know,
can you
I
tell
tell
that a
all
little
of
bit?
my tow customers, you know, increase your deductibles to the highest amount possible,
Right.
right? Like have that threshold. I think like the highest deductible certain carriers can go up to is like 5 or 10K on the trucks. Like eat that cost. Like, there's no sense in putting in a claim
For
under 5K,
yeah. Yeah.
10K. Like and I think for some of the new towing companies, it's hard for them to understand that. But once they're in the industry, it's like, oh yeah, I should have taken care of that out of pocket. Now my premiums doubled.
Right.
Because you know, um, frequency in claims is not a good look at all to the insurance underwriters.
Right.
Have a bunch of small little claims, right? Underwriter's going to think that big pop's coming.
Of course.
And then, but if you do have a large claim that happens and that's your only claim, we can sell that as agents as a shock loss, right? To the underwriters, like, hey, listen, like this was so unavoidable. Nothing could be done. Like, here's the data, here's their 5 years of history. Like, let's look at this one as a shock loss. And then I also think that it's important for towers to work with an agent that specializes in their industry, because of the tools and the resources, like us. Like, for example, we're going to be implementing our, quarterly claims review, like for an account that justifies that, right? Like, we're not going to do it for like your one or two truck
Sure.
account, but a large towing business, those are the services that are going
Unpack it for them. Yeah.
that are going to come. It's not just about the policy. It's about, okay, what other services can be offered to a towing company besides just writing their insurance, issuing their certs, ID cards, like we're trying to go the extra mile and really get into the meat and potatoes of the towing company and look at their claims and get them the information that they need so they can make better decisions.
Andrew, for those that are listening, everybody, I mean, obviously it's the towing audience, right? So like, but for those that are listening, one other thing that I don't want to forget to ask you or tell you
Sure.
is everybody that I talk to, every tower, they sort of cringe at the thought of applying. Tell me how you do it differently than other people. In other words, I want to get a quote from you. What's the fastest way?
The fastest way is to reach out to me 90 days, right? 90, 120 days before your expiration so we can, take our time. I find that the biggest, issues with insurance and me being approached for quotes is somebody's approaching me a week before the renewal, right? We don't have enough time to
The
learn
shop.
more about your operations, get applications together and talk big picture. And I see that a lot, like people just waiting till the last minute or
Right.
and it could be because you guys are super busy business owners. I get it. But I think that's the biggest thing is like, hey, like let's have a conversation 90 days out and see if it's a good fit for us to, work
Gotcha.
together.
Yeah. So
Uh,
can they go to your social media pages and
Yeah,
start
they can
get
they
that
can
process?
go to my social media and one of the things that we're changing here on our end, right, as we just did this merger is that so I have um seven team members that handle, the servicing side and everything. So we're making one of them a somebody to help me with applications and taking initial cost because like I'm good at putting myself out there. I'd say that's my strength is having these conversations, learning more about the business. But when it comes to like paperwork and apps, like So we're having somebody that's going to be assigned to just do that,
Gotcha.
which
Follow
is
up,
gonna. What'd you say?
follow-ups and whatnot.
Yeah, follow-ups for new business. So that's going to be a game changer. And as we grow, we'll be looking to implement that a little bit more.
Oh,
Because
that sounds like the right approach, particularly considering the fact that your outreach is relatively large,
yeah,
uh, at least as it relates to the rest of the industry. We're getting there, so I'm encouraged when I see you, when I see some of these other people. I've had a few of them on the show, generate a substantial social media following. I've taken a lot of your time, Andrew, but before I let you go, I
sure.
wanted to ask if you had to choose one thing about the industry that you'd like to direct more awareness to, what do you think that one thing might be? Whether it's related to what you do or just the industry in general.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it would come down to, recognizing that be careful who you put in your truck, in your trucks, hiring the right driver, be careful of growing too fast, putting too many trucks on the road too fast, and really just double down on safety. That's just the biggest thing. Investing in the equipment in your truck, investing, in training classes, and um, you know, really going the extra mile because we're gonna need it. The industry is, I mean, how many years can you pay 25% increase over and over and over,
Not
right?
many. Yeah, not many. I mean,
No, not at all.
yeah, so what you're telling the industry, uh, I'm 100% on board with. Respect
Yeah.
the risk.
Yep.
Respect the risk. You've got this truck on the road, you've got some guy
Mhm.
you don't really know
Yep.
driving a truck, what's his printout look like? What's the driving record look like?
Yep.
Um, if he doesn't listen to you when you tell him to wear his reflective gear,
Yep.
chances are he may not listen to you when you tell him about other safety rules. So,
Right.
yeah, I think that's the right message. And again, I've taken so much of your time. I'm so grateful
Oh,
that
good.
you've come
Yeah.
on and that you've shared um all of this really pertinent information with towers. And I before I leave, I'd like
Mhm.
to remind towers of what I always tell them is if you're not willing to know, please don't tow. I mean, I can't put it any more simpler than that. I want to also remind towers that all of Andrew's information is going to be in the video description. So if you have a need for towing insurance, or if you just like to know more about what it takes to get towing insurance, please reach out to Andrew. I'm sure he'll be of help. Andrew, thank you so much for being
Yeah.
on the podcast. I appreciate it.
And thank you for having me, Art. It was
Of
great
course.
talking to you. Really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.